Pinky and the Brain, Issue 7. I don't like the rhyming narration. It overstayed its welcome by the first panel. It does nothing but state the obvious, wasting time. Pinky gets scared by thunder and tries to read a book he read 3 times to feel better. At least I know something he does as a hobby. He asks Brain to distract him by telling a story. And Brain agrees because he wouldn't get any work done with them freaking out anyways. Did we need this Peach? The story after this will feel a bit pointless if it's just a story Brain's telling. And this is a series that starts out some of the episodes in the wrong time period and place with no explanation. So could have gotten away with omitting the first page. The narration says that a scholar and magician in the 16th century had proven himself to be a genius to the world and wanted to take it over. And of course, he looks like Brain and has a sidekick looking like Pinky. Brain somehow expects me to believe he memorized every parchment, scroll, and book. Brain doesn't know how to take over the world and says he has to know all of its knowledge and secrets, which he should know would be impossible and take several lifetimes. Pinky is relatable by being bored. The swirling mist above Pinky changes and Pinky apologizes. Brain says they should go outside to clear their heads. It's cold and Pinky wishes he had a cap like his. So why doesn't he? Their old friend Dorian out of nowhere approaches them on a horse and this confuses Brain because he's supposed to be very old. Pinky says he heard that Dorian made a deal with Mistopheles to become young if he hangs an ugly portrait in his living room. Brain naturally questions why he'd care about lousy decorating choices. This will never be explained. It's interesting to see a focus on magic in a Pinky and the Brain story. Someone makes a sarcastic remark about Brain's honesty, and we see a performing magician thank the audience that's enjoying itself. And bores me by wanting to pull a rabbit out of a hat when that's cliche. He pulls Pinky out of his hat, and Brain says that proves he's a charlatan, even though it's still magical of him to do. Memphis knows that's not a rabbit and summons Bugs Bunny and the Tiny Toons characters, one of whom insults the other for his lazy quips. Memphis thanks them at the end of the show, and Pinky gets warped to Brain with an empty space in his stomach for no reason. And he must be joking that it's the size of a burger to hint that he wants one, because how would he know how big it is? Brain talks as if he's literally a doctor. I guess he got his doctor's degree before he wanted to take over the world, because otherwise he wouldn't have had the patience to devote so much time every day to becoming a doctor, while being a megalomaniac. Brain wants some knowledge bestowed on him by Memphis if he promises to put something in his house in exchange. Memphis already knows what he wants and offers some ultimate knowledge in exchange for signing a contract. It's so obvious the contract would be to give him his soul, and I don't know why he'd want it, because if he's evil, because he's like a devil and has that name, wouldn't he approve of Brain being sort of evil and want it to last longer, instead of wanting to guarantee he'll punish him in hell? If he's really powerful, why doesn't he just zap up new people to punish in hell, instead of going through all this trouble actually? If Brain actually causes enough trouble, he'll go to hell anyways, so Memphis would know there's no point in doing this. Pinky's wise enough to be suspicious of the contract, and lampshade Brain signing it without even reading the fine print. Brain's too desperate and impatient to care and assumes that every contract has a loophole. Go figure he signed away his soul to him. We see a narration saying that Brain started inventing tons of inventions to benefit the world. As if he wouldn't be able to do that without making that deal. Why didn't he? I guess the deal made him smart enough to realize he had to do this to get loved. It earned him fame, love, and fortune. Good. He financed great libraries and research centers, and matched wits with the greatest minds on the planet. But it's all just a story being told by Brain anyways. Then the day arrived when he was crowned Emperor of the World. I doubt that happened unless he used mass brainwashing, which he also didn't need the devil for. Wouldn't he think he's smart enough as it is because he's so arrogant? In fact, why would he even think he needs ultimate knowledge of everything? The light bulbs are too bright, and for some reason it causes Brain to fall down some stairs. You know, it's pretty ironic that in a story told by Brain, this still happened. And Pinky lies to try to save face for him. Brain's narration says that he built great cities and rid the planet of war, famine, and disease. With this level of technology, I can believe it. I would say this proves that he's got good intentions for the world, and so it's good that that's part of the story. But it could also be that he's just saying this to Pinky to get him to think he's got good intentions. Then we see Memphis threaten them, and Brain demands a trial to examine their deal, when he's aware that Memphis would get to pick the judge and jury anyways. So he's just trying this out of desperation. Wait a minute, if Rick can make himself immortal, why didn't Brain do that for himself and Pinky? Because he knew this was coming up, so he would have avoided it. Memphis says the jury features some of the most evil men and wastes tons of time describing them. It's stupid that it isn't explained what makes the comic editor evil. Pinky and Brain get slapstick, and the trial drags out too long as Brain's questioned on whether he signed the contract. Brain tells Memphis that he didn't keep his end of the bargain, because if he had ultimate knowledge, he'd find a loophole in the contract. Not if there isn't one. The closest he's done to finding a loophole in the contract is doing this. Good, Memphis gets hit. This caused them to give him his soul back and call off the deal. He says he'll take back all of the years that Brain ruled the world, as well as his memories of them. Wouldn't it be more spiteful to let him keep his memories of ruling the world and torment him with the fact that he's not doing that? Why would Brain think he could ever get help from a cat? Unless he was brainwashed. It turns out there's another story taking place in the caveman days, which makes it confusing that Brain's there and alone. So he and Pinky must have somehow got separated from each other after using the time machine. The pacing of the story is fast because there's not as much dialogue. He tries hitting his own chest on a cliff in front of an audience and they laugh. And he sadly kicks a bone and it lands on Pinky. Brain shows Pinky a cave painting of himself at the top of a hill having crushed someone with a boulder, which would require super strength. Pinky politely claps for it to make him feel better, and suddenly Brain gets poked by a caveman and they get hurt. Pinky juggles rocks and drops one on his foot. Then lightning strikes a tree and makes a flaming branch fall on a dinosaur that's somehow alive in caveman times, even though it died from the different oxygen level. So Brain must have made all those dinosaurs as imperfect imitations. Brain gets an idea and there's a cave painting of him using a torch to set fire to a large creature to send it after cavemen, because apparently he was too stupid to make the dinosaurs he made obey him. They paddle across water on something and Pinky blows bubbles at an alligator, causing it to threaten them. They make it out of the river and get to a fruit tree and a dragonfly sends them to the top of a mountain. They get dropped down a rocky cliff into a swamp. They end up getting grabbed by a nonsensically nice orange dinosaur that's really happy with hearts above it. Which must be a parody of Barney that sucks because it's not even purple. Because of some mud, they end up slipping out of his grip, and for some reason there's fire behind them and lava, which would kill someone from convection alone. It just seems like bullshit that the torch got lit this way. That dinosaur was harmless. It never proved it could breathe fire. Oh, but having lightning hit the stick would be too boring and predictable. But at least it makes sense. It turns out they're on fire too, but that doesn't actually stop them. They make some progress with the torch and it turns from day to night. Wouldn't the fire have completely consumed it by now? That's silly. Brain uses a hollow little reed to spit a pebble at an alligator to imitate Pinky's mistake. So Pinky's mistake was a good thing. And he grabs onto the tail of the alligator while it chases Pinky, riding it across the river in a dangerous looking gamble. Eventually he shows some cavemen a torch, and they yawn. Logically they would yawn because fire would have been well known to cavemen since cavemen first became classifiable as sentient. If lightning hitting a branch is enough to create fire that can be indirectly held, they would have done this too, so of course they wouldn't be impressed. We see a lot of them with torches, and somehow one of the cavemen had thought to light a fire on something that wouldn't exist as early as this. and somehow that destroys Brain's motivation for the plan, even though his plan was to set fire to dinosaurs to get them to go after cavemen, to spread terror. So he could still do that. I have to assume that it took so long for him to get the torch here that he forgot that he was gonna set dinosaurs on fire. But even then, he should have known that the dinosaurs would go after him and kill him. Pinky and the Brain, Issue 8. Pinky gets excited about a package he ordered showing up, and somehow Brain expects me to believe that the last time he got one, he started breathing too fast. He ordered some music, but for some reason his 8-track got smashed. Conveniently, it's got a secret micro set with secret microfilm. And Brain plays it on a tape recorder because he assumes it's important. Then they get given a mission as if they're James Bond out of nowhere, so I'm less invested in the story. It makes sense that someone would want to take advantage of Brain. He's told to steal a computer chip internet control program that's going to be unveiled later. It turns out they didn't get a pre-recorded message, and get asked if he accepts the mission or not. Which makes it a little more confusing because the person doesn't even react to the fact that he wants to take over the world. And after Brain says he'll try to confirm the chip to his personality and make every computer download his personality to it, which just reminds me of Sonic the Comic, he's told, yeah, right. So he doesn't think he'll succeed because he never does. That explains it. He's told the directions on how to break into the lab will be on the microfilm. And later that night, Brain gets mad at Pinky for dressing like Catwoman because he was told to dress like a cat burglar. For once it takes advantage of Brain being a mouse because he hates cats. Brain tells Pinky to do what he'll do to avoid the lasers in the room. And they go in there from a window they opened insanely easily. He gives Pinky a handheld mirror to reflect laser beams. Eventually, Pinky thinks he can do it with his eyes closed because it's so easy, and it cuts to Brain with a bandaged tail. It was smart of him to keep a bandage in his clothes just in case. He tells Pinky the floor is electrified, and it tries to shoot a grappling gun, but the spooler jams, and they get sent into a wall, and eventually sent to the floor to be electrocuted, but it's not even explained how they're fine in the next panel. It's good that we keep getting surprised by what happens next, even if it makes Brain's boring explanation about what he's gonna do pointless. Brain assumes he could guess the password to the lab door. Too bad he's not smart enough to use an intangibility ray to walk through the door, or make a portal gun to warp to behind it. If Pinky's open sesame is assumed to be a password, and he's told it's the wrong password, how is it possible that their dialogue afterwards isn't misinterpreted as more guesses about what the password is? Pinky apologizes. I don't know why Brain doesn't outright say Bill Gates, and instead the comic has to use a fake name. There's no chance Bill Gates would read the comic. Brain says that he's a focused, ambitious, unscrupulous genius, and he just assumes he's the same way. So he just assumes that the password is world domination, and it's magically the correct password. I don't get it. You'd think the password would be just a random string of letters and numbers, and that it wouldn't require someone to say it. The door must be equipped with chatbot AI that can figure out when his words are trying to be a password guess, which would be more trouble to program than it would be worth. Because Open Sesame was considered one, even though it wasn't preceded by the words, "the password is." And yet that wasn't the case for their dialogue afterwards. But then Brain's guess was recognized as a password, and not the words right before it. He got very lucky, at least until he found out that they're already moving the chip. Sure, it's convenient that the humans are ignoring him. I guess because they don't take him seriously. Pinky wonders why Brain won't just make another version of the chip. Brain agrees with the idea because the equipment is right here. Won't the humans around him hear him and want to stop him? They must be really confident that it'll fail just because he always did before. They could easily take a few seconds to kick them. The narration says that they worked through the night. See what I mean about sleep deprived? Pinky says something meaningless, and with no indication of being tired, Brain tells Pinky to go somewhere and play quietly as he wants to do some programming. So Pinky sees a copy machine and gets excited as I wonder if he'll save the world from Brain. He tells Brain he printed a picture after sitting on the photocopy machine. And Brain says he'll make the final adjustments, and wants to switch this chip with the original. Why does Brain waste time talking about his plan when he doesn't say anything new about it and already knows it? If he's so excited, why would he waste time with this and wait until the next morning to try to walk into a place with bad disguises they shouldn't bother with, and no press ID? He tells the guard what he is and gets told that he's funny, and they get let in anyways because nobody takes them seriously. You'd think the guard would already know what he is. Eventually, after Brain seems to be incompetent for some reason, turning a light too high up, the audience starts watching on live television, and Bill Gates puts a chip in the motherboard to log on. It's funny that he's shocked at seeing Pinky greet him in a goofy way with his verbal tics. Boy, Brain and Pinky can really cause a lot of trouble. Brain says that was no copy machine he used for his picture of a blue moon. That was the GAC control scanner. And the mainframe must have been set to scanner. So the story ends with the humans being upset at the huge video footage of Pinky acting silly. Why could the mainframe be set to scanner? Nobody wanted that. That was a bit of a confusing, really easy way for him to fail. It's always sweet when Brain doesn't bother punishing Pinky. The next story starts out in the Roman Empire, where Pinky and the Brain were somehow put to work hammering stones with humans rather than having lives like mice. If they got recognized as sentient beings, without creating a huge panic from talking mice, how would their talents be wasted here instead of them being sent to work engineering things? Why would they be sent to work doing this instead of someone wanting to make money off talking mice? Pinky compliments Brain, who tells him his latest plan to enter a chariot race and impress the Emperor with his inventions, in the hopes that it'll make him his right-hand man and heir. One of his inventions is spaghetti sauce in a bottle. How's that an impressive invention? Anyone could pour sauce in a bottle. Pinky wonders how they're going to go all the way to Rome from the pit, and Brain doesn't know. Someone says he's tired of being enslaved, and the guard says he'll take him to serve Caesar on his battleship, which causes Brain to get the obvious idea of how to get to Caesar. After they talk behind some people at lunch and get ignored by the disillusioned slaves, his uninspired but thankfully short speech gets ignored. Brain puts powder in the slaves' shorts and says he's responsible for that prank, but he's told that the itching powder made productivity go up, somehow, so he's told he'll get given extra food. Brain offers free new sandals to anyone who brings a sharp stick to the governor's tent. Somehow this causes the slaves to perk up when they have no reason to believe he'd be able to provide. They all run towards the tent, Pinky and the Brain get trampled, and the slaves stop, and we don't see the dialogue wasting our time as they explain things to the guards. So Pinky and the Brain get hurt, and the Emperor wonders where Brain is. And Brain says it's him, and then imitates a part of a movie where a bunch of people said I am Spartacus because Pinky says that he's Brain a lot, moving to a different place every time. He had no reason to do this, but I eventually got a quick chuckle out of it. I like that the Emperor referred to Pinky as the one with the identity crisis. He seems to have super speed from Brain science, leaving dust behind him. Why isn't that used more often? He says he'll make them galley slaves. And since they're so small, they're tied to the ends of drumsticks and used to hit drums for some reason, because nobody knew what else to do with them. We see the guards holding red bottles looking confused, and Brain says that while he's got the guards distracted, they'll get to shore and get to Rome. I guess they convinced the guards to let them make those bottles with a sauce in it. They launch themselves from a spatula near a wheel and get smacked into a wall. Then Pinky instantly tells him he's back with a silly horse for the chariot race. Too bad I don't know how he got it here. There must have been a time skip. I guess the reason he got the horse is that his owner hated it so much that he gave it away for free. It's weird to Pinky that he likes the horse for no reason, calling it Sugar. They go to the chariot race, and everyone conveniently lets some inexplicable lab mice race as if they weren't there. The chariots in front of them leave them far behind, and their horse turns around and runs the other way and towards the chariots for no reason. All of them crash into each other trying to get out of the way. So Brain wins by default. That was creative. But Brain wouldn't have impressed the Emperor with that because he didn't show off his inventing talent in the race. Pinky tries to compliment Brain, but he should know that spoilsport is an insult. That could easily apply to him. It'd make more sense if he was trying to insult him, because he knew he could get away with it. Brain holds a piece of paper and wants to show the Emperor's inventions. And Pinky shows him his bottle of spaghetti sauce that Brain wants to leave out because it still has some bugs. Then why did Pinky even bring it if he'd know about those bugs and he doesn't want Brain to fail? Then the sauce squirts out of the bottles, and that's somehow supposed to be an explanation for why the Emperor turns on Brain when it never made sense to begin with that his bottle sucked when he's a genius. Just because the Emperor said character assassination, when it's really more embarrassing for Brain that somehow gets the guards to accuse them of trying to kill the Emperor, and one wastes time complimenting his leader when he might not have a good reason to like him. Then they end up back in the pits, even though that was said to be really far away from Rome. That doesn't make any sense. That's a depressing ending. To be fair, they caused some trouble by getting the racers at the race to crash into each other, which would have gotten them all hurt, of course. So they should be punished. But being forced to hammer rocks all day like human slaves seems needlessly depressing, because them doing a human slave job seems more real, and thus easy to sympathize with, than their usual jobs as lab mice. The first story of issue 7 by Jess McCann is a pointless one where Brain tells Pinky a story about him making a deal with the devil that he shouldn't think he needs, and effortlessly inventing enough things to get the fame and fortune needed to take over the world. I hate that it just skips from him being loved to him being emperor of the whole world. That doesn't explain it. It would have been interesting to see Brain as a magician, but aside from him staring at fog from a cauldron, that's immediately dropped for a story where he easily gets a victory. And because Brain's telling the story, there's no indication of any bad things that resulted from it. And then he somehow got out of the deal with the devil because he didn't find a loophole in the contract. And while he didn't literally find a loophole in the contract, he basically did. So wouldn't he have not gotten him out of his deal because he said that? He's evil. So why would he humor Brain just because of anything he said? Jess McCann wrote the second story as well, which keeps its pacing unusually fast by having no dialogue for no reason. Brain tries to impress humanity in the caveman days by getting them a torch to show that he mastered fire, and goes on a long journey across the river with alligators to eventually get to a parody of Barney that exists for no reason, and somehow they find a torch afterwards. Brain did something cool but dangerous to get across the river. But humans weren't impressed because, go figure, they already learned how to use torches. That would have been a thing since people existed. So why did Brain think that would impress anyone? The first story in issue 8 by Bobby and David Wace was about Brain suddenly getting given a mission by a tape recorder put in a ruined package of Pinkies, which I guess he ordered with someone's credit card from the lab. Because it's about time someone tried to take advantage of Brain. He's told to steal something for some unexplained reason. And Brain's plan fails because somehow his grappling hook screws up on the way there, and he takes too long guessing the password instead of simply hacking. So he makes a new chip. The real chip goes to be unveiled, and Pinky ends up printing a picture of himself and recording himself being silly, and putting that on the chip that got shown off. He failed because the mainframe was set to scanner, which he somehow didn't know. So that was a confusing way for his plan to fail at the slightest reason. Jesse McCann wrote the second story where Brain and Pinky get themselves in trouble as slaves in the Roman Empire trying to get people to attack the guards ridiculously easily, and get sent to a battleship as a punishment. Brain gets the guards distracted with some bottles of sauce he made off screen, with no explanation for why he was allowed to make them, so I guess he made them when no one was looking. And he flanks him and Pinky from a spatula to get off the ship, and they eventually enter the chariot race with a horse that goes around and runs at their opponents for no reason. It'd make more sense if Brain told the horse to do that because he knew it would work out for him. Brain wanted to impress the Emperor with his inventions to become his right-hand man, but Pinky somehow insisted on bringing the bottle of sauce to show him, even though that did nothing but squirt sauce and break apart. Something that never made any sense because Brain's a genius. So Brain ends up humiliating the Emperor with a failure that's completely forced, and ends up back in the slave pits for some reason. Why are they called by different names? The idea that they're actually born in those different countries and time periods than usual would make even less sense, because there couldn't have been genetically engineered genius lab mice in those time periods either.